Hello and a very warm welcome to St Peter Mancroft Church as the city clock strikes 1 o'clock. I'm Edward Carter, the vicar here. Every day at 1 o'clock we have some prayers, perhaps a service, and on Wednesdays we have a reflection, a short reflection. So if you're here in the church and would like to listen to the reflection, that would be lovely. If you're buying Christmas cards or just visiting, please do carry on exactly as you are. And if you're joining us online for the live stream, then a warm welcome to you as well. I'm Edward Carter, and I'm the vicar here at this church, at St Peter Mancroft. Well, a year ago, last October, we had a tremendous build-up to a thing called COP26, which was a very big coming together of all sorts of people, different countries, different representatives in Glasgow. And it was all about climate change and what we can do to try and prevent the worst effects of climate change and turn that around. That was COP26 a year ago. But in fact, strangely, there's another COP conference happening in Montreal this December, and it's COP15, which sounds all wrong because it's a lower number, COP15. But in fact, there's a different series of these conferences, not on climate change, but on biodiversity, which is to say these big gatherings are about the different species there are here on Earth, the amazing variety of life, and how we can protect this wonderful diversity that we have on our planet. So in many ways, this alternative series of Conference of the Parties is what they actually are, is equally important as the climate change series. Because biodiversity on our planet is under serious threat. There is a natural extinction rate when it comes to animals. We only have to think of perhaps creatures that we find remains of, fossils, and we know that species do die out. That does happen naturally, just as part of things. But the extinction rate now is, people estimate, 1,000 times faster than normal, or even 10,000 times faster than it would normally be under a natural pattern. Why? Why is this extinction rate so much higher now than it's ever been before? And the answer is, I'm afraid, to do with the human race, to do with our own position here on the planet, the way in which we've become so dominant here on Earth. Many species are threatened, and indeed many have been so threatened that they've been wiped out when they would normally have carried on quite happily in their own part of their own ecosystem. Human beings have created a kind of monoculture effect when it comes to agriculture. They've brought about habitat loss, land use. There are lots of big issues which mean that species of animals, plants, birds, insects, the whole variety of life is more and more under pressure and threatened. And that's why the extinction rate, sadly, has risen so much more than it would normally be. But I'm always someone who tries to be hopeful about things, and I believe that conferences like the COP15 conference in Montreal will make a difference. I believe this is something we're much more aware of now. And as I was reflecting in my prayers as well on the extraordinary variety of life on Earth just a few days ago, a slightly odd question came into my mind. I found myself asking, which animals are actually mentioned in the Bible? The scriptures, which give us in many ways a framework for our understanding of life under God. Perhaps you can think of a few, but there are lots. In fact, I found a great list, and these are just a few, more or less at random, from this list of animals, living creatures that are in the Bible. The ant is mentioned in Proverbs. Cows, of course, are mentioned. Isaiah, you could look in the book of the prophet Isaiah to find a cow. Dogs are mentioned, not always get a very good press, but dogs certainly. Donkeys, yes. Think only of Palm Sunday. The dove, do you remember the story of Noah's Ark? The dove. And eagles are certainly mentioned as well. I'm just going to read down a few more on the list. A fox is mentioned in the Bible, the frog, a whale, Jonah, of course, swallowed by a whale. The heron gets a mention. The lion certainly does. And locusts, they do. Even a maggot gets a mention, the humble maggot. There's mention of an ostrich also in the book of Lamentations. Sheep certainly get plenty of mentions. One of the Psalms has reference to a snail. How lovely. Snakes, of course, do get a mention as well. Well, there are lots of others. The wolf, certainly, as well. So you can see that in the story which the scriptures set out, the story of God and creation and life, the animals play an important part in that. Now, strangely, Noah's Ark is kind of, we imagine, the archetypal story about animals, about life. But it's only a general description. If you were to read in the book of Genesis about Noah's Ark, you'd only get a general description. All the birds and animals, they're kind of a label attached to them all. And there's not a long list. So the animals going in 2 by 2 is true, but the lovely models we see or the pictures we see, they're a kind of illustration of the general thing. Although the raven and the dove do get a mention at the end of the story of Noah's Ark, when the olive tree twig is brought back to the ark. But what about the Christmas story? Now we imagine the Christmas story with an ox and an ass and maybe other creatures gathered at the crib. Maybe some camels arriving with the wise men as well. But in fact, if you read the Christmas story in the Bible, there's no mention of an ox nor of an ass. In fact, Mary doesn't travel to Bethlehem on a donkey. She might have done, but it's not actually mentioned in the Bible. The camels don't get a mention either. The wise men certainly arrive with their gifts, but there's no mention of camels. The only mention is the shepherds up on the hill above Bethlehem, and there's mention of a flock. And we imagine sheep, I'm sure, but could have been sheep, could have been goats, who knows? A flock of creatures certainly gets a mention. Now, 2 years ago, we were in the first throes of the pandemic and the lockdown. And as a community project, we started making a lockdown crib set because we couldn't have some of our big community carol services. And lots of people helped make an amazing crib set, a new crib set for this church, St. Peter Mancroft. Mary, Joseph, a little crib with a baby, shepherds, wise men, all sorts of people, and indeed 1 or 2 animals were made as part of that. Last year we added some more figures to the crib set in 2021. But this year we're deliberately asking if people who want to be involved would like to make some more animals for our crib set and be imaginative about it. Not just think the ox and the ass, which anyway, as I've just said, didn't actually get a mention in Scripture, but to think creatively about how all the animals might come and worship the newborn baby Jesus. And tomorrow, in fact, here at the church, it being half-term week, Thursday, I'm going to be down in our octagon room running a couple of workshops to help people make animals if they want to come along. And if you're around in the city tomorrow, which is Thursday, the 27th of October, then you'd be more than welcome to join in 10:30 and 2 o'clock to 90-minute workshops. Maybe I'll see you then. Or maybe you're wondering why. Why on earth would we want to make some animals to come and be part of a crib set? Why maybe would we have an ostrich or an ant or a fox or a dog, all these creatures that I mentioned a moment ago in the list of animals that are in the Bible? And I think my answer to that very good question, why, is because we want to celebrate the amazing diversity of creation, the amazing diversity of life that there is here on earth. Because at the crib, that's where creation gathers to worship God, to give thanks to God for the presence of God with us in a tiny newborn baby. And if the crib set this year does have lots of extra animals, which I hope and pray it will, I think it will remind us that all created things in their own way do give worship and praise to God. It's very tempting to think that we human beings are quite simply the most important thing imaginable. And as we look at a crib set and we see various people, we're kind of reinforcing that idea. And my hope is that if we see lots of animals as well gathered in Bethlehem, gathered at the crib, which probably was the case, in fact, if we see those animals as well, it will help us to be just a bit more humble about our own place in the scheme of things. And indeed, not just humble, but even repentant, penitent before God, that we so often mess things up, that we so often don't bear in mind the breadth of life, the glory, the splendor of God's creation. All too often, unthinkingly, even if we don't want to, we collude in that horrible extinction rate which has risen so much. So I, for one, because I love making things, am looking forward to making some animals, maybe birds, maybe insects, who knows, this year for our crib set. And I'm hoping that others might come along and join in, perhaps you. But I'm hoping and praying as well that that conference I spoke about, which is happening in December in Montreal, COP15, does go well, is blessed by God, that there might be a change of heart, change of action as part of that conference, because the glorious breadth of living things on earth is something that points us truly to God and reminds us of God's grace and God's presence with us. Thank you so much for listening to my short reflection today. We are soon into November, and there will be a special series of Wednesday reflections at 1 o'clock through November, which my colleague Fiona Harworth is organising. There'll be even a short time of prayer and a mini service, I think, people from the hospital and other places who will be here as part of an art exhibition that will be at the front of church called The Leaves of the Trees. It's a beautiful art installation that's arriving this weekend. And so those November reflections, while it's here with us, will very much connect to that art installation. I do hope you can visit the building, yes, but be part of those Wednesday 1 o'clock moments in the coming months. Thank you again very much for joining me today.